the best way to describe myself. I consider myself a humble servant to humanity, and that tells you that I'm into activism. I'm a women, girls, and disability rights advocate working with female survivors of rape, sexual and domestic abuse, and I have an organization called Smart Women's Initiative. It's an organization that works with this category of women that I stated earlier, and we're the first in Sierra Leone working with persons, specifically women with hearing and speech impairment. And back home in Sierra Leone, the prevalence of gender-based violence is all over the place. So someone somewhere has to take the lead and ensure we champion this and give out the stories of powerful women like myself. Sometimes people ask questions like, why did you choose this career path?
I was just going there.
Yeah, so it's not an intentional path, or it's not an intentional choice, but basically based on my ordeal, because they always say he who feels it knows it. I'm a survivor of sexual child abuse at age 8. I survived sexual child abuse when I was 8 years old. So imagine a young girl surviving that at 8 years old. That tells you that there are hundreds or thousands or even millions of women dying in silence who are ready to tell their story, but they don't know how to tell their story. And after telling their story, the next step is, how can I seek redress? What are my protection mechanisms? Is my state ready to give me all the protection? So basically, overall, that's just who Amira is.
So how long have you been in this advocacy?
With Smart Women's Initiative, it's 5 years. But my entire life, it's like 6.5 years.
Can you tell us about the impact and the approach? You know, I think Sierra Leone and Liberia, the approach of advocates towards ending all forms of violence against women may be the same, because the culture almost the same, the society almost the same.
Exactly.
So tell us your approach and the impact you're making.
So for Smart Women's Initiative, from my end, we believe in the power of telling stories. Just like I said earlier, if you have to make an impact, it has to start from you. We ensure sharing my story has given the power to hundreds, thousands of women back home to tell their stories. Let's go back to 2017. The very first time I decided to tell my story openly, as in going in one of the biggest radio stations in Sierra Leone, it was the midday show, and I had to share my story. That radio station is where you have the presidents listening, some key stakeholders in the country listening to the program. I shared my story, but I remember that afternoon when I was in the studio telling my story, I was shaking. I was literally shaking, because there are questions I know would be thrown at me like, why are you telling the story now? Is it true that it happened to you? And if it happened to you, why you choose to go open to tell your story? But mind you, after surviving my abuse at age 8, it was very hard for me to share my story, even within my family. My family never knew that I went through that, because it was repeated. It's not something that happened in just one incident and then it passed by. No. It was a continual process. And sadly, when we speak of sexual gender-based violence, the perpetrators lies within our trusted allies. It either becomes family, it becomes friends, it becomes colleagues, just within that circle. And in my case, it happened within my family. So that's a hard thing to break outside, based on the cultural belief and practices, and in the name of protecting the family name. So how did I tell my story? This thing happened when I was 18. At 16, I had this, just like what you said, Sierra Leone and Liberia, there are lots and lots of similarities in culture, even infrastructure-wise. When I came, I'm like, okay, it's not much different from back home. It's almost the same. So they had to call a family gathering, like thinking that I think she has indulged into some sexual activities. 16, I was growing. At that time, I was about to enter university. And I'm like, no, I'm innocent. I haven't started any sexual activity. But there was this thing bugging me inside that I felt someone should know my story. I had to tell my story. The shocking thing that happened in my family was breaking silence and identifying my perpetrator at that time.
Okay.
That was like a big bombshell in my family. People were shocked. Like, how did this happen? Why didn't you talk about it? So myself leading this fight for Smart Women's Initiative has given so much hope to hundreds, thousands of women and girls back home to tell their story, because you have to understand that it is never your fault. Within our society, most times, instead of the society looking beyond blaming the victim or the survivor, they tend to protect the perpetrator, like, oh, he's a man. And failing to understand, even if I'm 60 years old, there's something still called rape, and there's something called marital rape. I don't know whether that works in Liberia, but in Sierra Leone, people tend to question the word marital rape. They go like, how can you tell me that I raped my wife? I paid her bride price. But the truth is, you didn't purchase her body. That's just the significance of telling the people that I appreciate you raising this beautiful woman. And in our culture and respect, we use dowry in exchange. I don't even want to use the word in exchange, because that's totally wrong, because the perception that we have in our society is women are bought. And in most cases, in actual cases, we are not bought.
So as you work with with these women, with these girls, do you see the story of Amira, shared by your beneficiaries?
I live Amira's story every day. I don't only see it, but I live Amira's story every day. My story is not much different from the typical Sierra Leonean women. I'm certain out of 10 Sierra Leonean women you meet, at least 3 might have suffered one form of gender-based violence. It could be sexual, it could be physical, it could be domestic, or any form of violence. I live my story every day. Like I said, I came to Liberia on Monday, and it was on Tuesday I had a call back home. I told you my organization is the first and only in Sierra Leone, working with hearing and speech impaired female survivors. And I had a call.
So that distinguishes you from
others.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had a call telling me that there's this hearing impaired woman who was raped by 2 men. This hurts. This is my life. This is my story. And my story is in their eyes, is living in them, and their story is also living in me. So the African woman's story lives every single day. It's so hard to live these stories every day, because it's a roller coaster of mixed emotions, and it takes you aback of the ordeal you've been through, how hurtful it is. But you have to fight. Someone has to be that sacrificial lamb. Someone has to be that voice. You have to tell the stories of the millions of women and girls dying in silence. And sadly, there are hundreds, in fact thousands, not even hundreds, of women who want to tell their story, but they don't know how to tell their story. And what hurts the most is when we tell our stories are being questioned by society. Are you sure it happened? Why did you go into his room? If a girlfriend tells you that my boyfriend raped me, then they go like, why did you go into his room? You actually know that going into his room is going to lead to sexual activity. No! Going into your room does not give you permission to have sex with my body.
So if the victim is visually impaired and deaf and dumb, how challenging is that? Because someone will tell it for her.
So we've dealt with that. We haven't had a survivor who has both impairments, but we've dealt with visual impaired survivors as well. And it's tough. It's really challenging, because back home our society is not structured in a way that it can provide redress mechanism for persons with disabilities, specifically hearing and speech impaired persons. So what hurts the most is visual impaired can't identify
the perpetrator.
That hurts. Quite recently we had a visual impaired, we call them call this thing Okada. I see you guys having it here. There's motorbike.
Yeah.
No, it's motorbike. It's not a tricycle. Back home we have keke too.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes. There was this blind lady who had to board a bike for the rider to take her to her destination. The rider took her to a whole different place. I think it was dark in the evening, and then she was raped. She was left there on the road to perish. Someone had to pick her up, helped her, and then they contacted us. Sadly, she just can't identify who the person is, and this really hurts. Quite recently on Saturday, because I came here on Monday, we had another survivor of a 7-year-old girl who has been abused by a 22-year-old boy, and then the girl is badly infected with STI. These are the challenges we have every single day. But quite recently, we received a fund from one of our donors back home, which which had helped us to train 3 key service provider organizations back home on sign language, on how to provide the basic, because you can't learn sign language in 6 months. It's just like a formal education. The things you and I have acquired, we didn't acquire it over 6 months, neither did we acquire it over 5 years. It's more than 10 years. It's a gradual and everyday process.
Yeah.
So we had to train them for 6 months to understand the basic steps to provide redress mechanism to female survivors of hearing and speech impairment. Me, myself, I'm learning sign language. I'm like 60% upskilled, and I'm still learning. So we want to encourage the society to understand that it is our responsibility, just like when someone gets the urge or the craving to learn French, to learn Spanish. That's how we should have the urge to learn sign language. And mind you, people say people with hearing and speech impairment, they don't speak. No, that's a lie. They do speak. The problem is our society has failed to understand their means of communication. And the powerful and uniqueness in their language is they use their hands to talk. So if you don't understand my language, it's never my fault. It's your responsibility.
There's a total disconnect there.
It's a total disconnect. In March, International Women's Day, we had the former Irish ambassador as our keynote speaker, and we had some key government officials at the event. And then, you know, Sierra Leone and Liberia, we have this power cuts thing. Yeah. It's just a similar challenge. So we were at the middle of the program, and these people are hearing and speech impaired. So their means of communication is reading lips and understanding the movement of hands, because we had an interpreter there, a sign language interpreter there. Then the power just went off. That was the very first time in my life to understand that without power supply, these people can't understand or communicate in a better way. And I remember the Irish ambassador also identified that. So it had to shift my mind a little bit for me to dig deeper and understand. It's an everyday process of learning. I keep learning the work that I do, particularly in this unique space of working with hearing and speech impaired persons.
So when you encounter a survivor, for example, I also read that you provide free psychosocial counseling. Mm-hmm. What do you do with them next?
We use the survivors-based approach. I am the founder, so being a survivor, we use the survival-based approach. We have a one-on-one counseling that we embark on. We listen to the survivors. We can't work alone.
So how long does it go for?
It depends on the survivor's healing mechanism, but we can go as long as we feel like the person needs to heal. Okay. Some people can just come for like 3 sessions and they feel better, but we can't work alone in this space. There's a connection we have. We work with the Sierra Leone police. We work with medical system. There's I think it's a UK-based charity hospital back home. It's called Aberdeen Women's Centre. We work with them. They provide free medical services, and to an extent, if there's a need for surgical operation, then they can do it at no charge at all. Okay. And then we also work with one of the oldest GBV organizations in Sierra Leone, because they have vast experience, but we are coming from the survivors-based approach. We listen to the stories of survivors. We make the society understand that these women can't lie. They are telling the truth, and that's their story. And we empower these women to empower other women to tell their story. Because hearing my story from a survivors-based approach, you will understand that, yes, it didn't only happen to you. We're countless in this fight. And it is only when you tell your story can give power to other women to tell their story, can give power to other women to avoid blaming themselves that it was my fault, or oh, because of I remember sometime we have a community back home called Kent. I went there just on a normal social visit. You go on Saturdays to these places to just relax. Then I met this beautiful little child. I believe she was around 5-6 years old. She sat outside. She was crying bitterly. I had to just have a disconnect from my social activity, and I was drawn to this baby. I went to this baby, having a sit down moment with her, listening to her story while she was crying. And then I saw the mother outside again crying. But then I spent more than 2 hours just to understand the story and know the story. Because before women who are survivors of gender-based violence have to share the story, they have to trust you. These are the big challenges we experience in our lives. Because the moment someone has breached that sector in your life, it's hard to get trust in someone. So you have to be around trusted person. Those are the advantages that we got back home, because they know this organization is led by survivors. Our staff, 80% of our staffs are survivors.
Okay.
So you have to you understand.
So you're part of the story.
We are the story. We're not even part of the story. We are the story.
Okay, so that was the reason, and it also drives the passion.
Exactly.
Okay. So
exactly.
Last year, during the heat of the coronavirus, governments around the world told their citizens to stay home. But some homes weren't safe.
Of course, that increased it. Particularly everywhere in the world.
There was a major protest in Liberia. I don't know if you realize that there was an increase in SGBVs in Sierra Leone.
I think it's not only in Sierra Leone, it's globally, because I'm a UN Women National Gender Youth Activist at a global level for Sierra Leone. So we share these experiences within our space. We're 300 in the entire world. So most times we have Zoom meetings, we tell our stories, share our experiences back home. This does not only affect Sierra Leone, it affects the entire world. And most homes, with or without lockdown, is never safe. You find, because in this part of the world, I don't know whether it also applies to Liberia, but back home, only few women are financially independent, and financial independence counts a lot. If I depend on my man to provide the basic needs, and most men take advantage of that, because sometimes men don't even understand that depriving someone financially, especially when you're the married couple, by the way, because if you back home in Sierra Leone, if you've lived with your spouse for 5 years, that automatically makes you married. I don't know whether
I think it's the same. I mean, like people think that, I mean, this is your husband.
As long as you stay together for 5 years.
Yes.
Yes.
Even though, I mean, it's not on the book. It's not like on the paper. Yeah, but
5 years.
Society sees you as married.
Oh yeah. That's how society perceives you. So most times men will go like, today I'm not gonna provide food on the table for you. And if you dare question what they've said, that's gonna come with a heavy slap. Most times women suffer domestic violence, they suffer physical violence, and it's not as if they don't want to walk away from those hurtful, demeaning settings. But the question is, how am I going to seek redress? And you know what hurts the most? Some of our leaders who are at the power, at the helm of power, are perpetrators too. So where exactly are you going to seek redress? Imagine me being a survivor, and let's say, for instance, you're the Minister of Social Welfare. Back home we call it social welfare, right?
So it's like you reporting the perpetrator to a perpetrator.
So a perpetrator who's going to just coach the entire process.
Let's come back to your mission to Liberia. Why are you here? What's the interest?
Well, I'm in Liberia to understand the dynamics on my work, the work that I do. I have had several engagements with some international organizations here, and hopefully today I'm supposed to meet with a deaf school here. I just need to understand the dynamics and find a way how I can penetrate into the space, because from what I've gathered, Liberia is quite a virgin land, and I don't know, maybe someone can give me something different from what I'm going to say, but I learned that there's an organization here working specifically on hearing and speech impaired female survivors of sexual and domestic abuse. So that's the reason why I'm here.
So, I mean, after the mission, you go back and what do you expect to know? What do you expect to see? What will be your interest? I mean, in a particular area.
I like to know everything. There's nothing. I want to touch on every area that is related to female survivors of rape, sexual and
Do
domestic
you hope
abuse.
to see meet with the authorities, like the Ministry of Gender,
If there's
Children
a
and Social Protection?
if there's a possibility, I would like to. I would like to do that and have a discussion. You know Liberia better than me. You're a national here. I just come. Although Liberia is a sister country, I consider Liberia home from home. So whatever is available, I'll grab and just listen, understand, go back home, try to navigate my way through, put it on the table, discuss with my team, discuss with existing donors we have there, and see the possibility of how we can spread our tentacles here.
So let's see if we can take a few calls from listeners. Call us on 077.
Because if we go back to 10 years down the road, we go back 15 years, we're never where we are today, right? It has.
So what has changed?
The confidence level, we continue to build the confidence of women. Mind you, this is something that have existed for more than 3,000 years. Maybe since creation, by the way. It has existed for that long. So changing it has to be a continual process. It's not going to happen even in the next 30 years. It's not going to happen in the next 50 years. But we're walking the walk. We have to do more. Mind you, it's a platform. We've had leaders who have worked, the people like the Madam Helen Johnson Sirleaf have done their part. We have other leaders come in. It's like doing a platform on a platform, doing a platform on a platform until we get to where we want to be. But hopefully we're planning to achieve Planet 50-50 someday. It might not be in my era, it might not be in your era, but I know it's going to happen.
Okay, so let's see if we can take this quarter. Good morning.
Y'all, please check out our website and please make a donation. Thank you.
We can take, I think, a call or two. 07705881886. If no call, let's come to you, Amira. I mean, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
You know, of course, I think many of you into this advocacy are getting overwhelmed by just the women side of it. But let's hear from this caller. Good morning.
But shifting back from me being a woman, we have to understand that the wall has been a male chauvinistic wall for a very, very long time. So when people go like, oh, everyone, everywhere in the world is talking about women's empowerment, women's safety. Yes, we have to, because for a very long time, like I said, women have always been submerged. The voices of women have been submerged. So if it gets to a point where the entire world has to shed light on women's suffering, on ensuring women have their rights, access, all the possibility, all the possible needs, I think we have to do that. But I cannot divert from the fact that women also perpetrate violence. That's true. But again, I am intentional in my work because I am a woman. I understand the suffering. I partly grew up in a domestic violence family. And with all the work that I have done over the years, women tend to suffer at a higher rate compared to the way men suffer violence. That doesn't mean men don't suffer violence. Yes, men do. But we should be asking ourselves, how many men out of 3 women, according to the UN Women Global Statistics, they have, out of 3 women you meet, one might have suffered one form of violence. And then if you look at from the men's angle, out of 10, maybe just 2. That doesn't mean men should not seek justice, but someone somewhere has to be intentional in the fight. Men should be willing to let go the ego, because I don't know whether it works here, but
Okay.
We've seen men being beaten by women, but the men can't talk about it. Are you ready to tell your story? We can't fight on your behalf if you don't want to tell your story. Because of the egoistic thing in them, they go like, oh me, I should go and tell the story that my woman slapped me.
So
No, I'm not going to do that. No, I think the men internalize shame.
Okay.
But society is you and I. It's what we feed the society that makes the society a society. So
Okay.
if men try to deconstruct that kind of egoistic shame in them, then I'm certain the world will be a better place. But if you continue to internalize it and think that, oh, I'm not gonna, it's gonna be really hard for me to go to the police and say, my woman had to slap me, my woman did this. No, they don't do it. So how do you expect us to fight?
Okay, Amira, we have to end up. Finally, what do you have to say before we leave you?
It's been a wonderful, wonderful segment with you. Thank you so much for hosting me. And
You're
to
welcome.
my Liberian people, I haven't met much of Liberian people though since I've been here. I think I've met less than 20 Liberian people here, but it's been wonderful, and I hope Liberia continue to be safe, and I hope the leadership of Liberia continue to put premium on women's leadership. The safety and security of women comes first, because without having a safe and secure and dignified space, the world won't be a better place. Thank you all so much, and I'm truly grateful, and big love from Sierra Leone.
Well, she's Amira Catherine Koroma. Is a survivor of sexual child abuse at age. She's the founder and executive director of Smart Women's Initiative in Sierra Leone. My name is Vafle Kamara. Coming up next is our is another